Is it working?
Trying.
Alrighty.
How much of a delay do we have?
Alright, so thank you for joining us this evening. This is the online judge class, week number 8. This evening we're going to be going over the Judging at Regular document. My name is John Aratunji.
I'm Stacy Winchell, and we are both level 2 judges from Rochester, Minnesota. And I apologize if there's any hiccups tonight. We are currently working on new software because we have switched from Google Hangouts to YouTube Live. I'm literally watching myself in the screen over here, and there is a huge delay. So gonna be living with that tonight. So welcome to beta again. Like we had gotten everything figured out, and then we're forced to switch. So.
But besides that, we do have a nice tool tonight in live chat. So if you have any questions at all throughout the night, I will be keeping an eye on our live chat. You can go ahead and ask them in there, and we will probably answer them on the stream, or if it's something more personal, just in the chat. I'm actually not entirely certain what happens with that chat once we are done with the stream. We will figure that out in about an hour, and any important excerpts which we don't cover in the stream, I'll go ahead and post either in the description or in the comments of this video. Also, if you look in the description of the video, there are a couple of links. One is to the outline for tonight. We are just going over the jar, so it's just a link to the jar because really there's no additional outline needed. It's a very concise, very on-point document. And other than that, we also have the link to the test, the practice test from last week. So we're going to go ahead and go over that now. All right. So the week 7 practice test.
All right. So week 7 practice test. Number 1. What are the 3 keywords that you look for in a triggered ability? The 3 keywords you're looking for are when, whenever, or at. Those are the 3 words that will always start your triggered ability. If it doesn't start with one of those, it's probably not a triggered ability. Exceptions as always, but good generic rule. So, number 2. Is there a restriction to when a trigger can occur, and when is the trigger added to the stack? So there is no restriction to when a trigger can occur. A trigger will occur at any time its condition is met. If you watched the video last week, John and I both had good examples of things happening at times where you wouldn't normally expect a trigger to happen. John actually had a great example of you cast a spell, Wheel of Fortune, and then there's an effect that says when you have no cards in hand, do a thing. Well, for a moment during Wheel of Fortune, you don't have cards in hand, so your effect does trigger. And it will be added to the stack before the next time a player would receive priority. And that's true of all triggered abilities, even if they trigger at a time that's normally unusual.
Yeah. So number 3, if multiple triggers have occurred for each player, how are they added to the stack? It's active player, non-active player order, just like any number of things, players getting priority, etc., making choices. So first, the active player adds any triggers to the stack which they control in the order of their choice. And then you go around to the non-active players. Usually you'll probably have one, but in the case of multiplayer, you go around in turn order. And then they add it to the stack. So the non-active players' triggers will resolve first before the active players.
Yes. All right. Number 4. If a triggered ability has an intervening if clause, when are the trigger conditions checked? Do trigger conditions with a may always trigger? My alarm. So intervening if clauses will check both when the condition is met as well as when the condition goes to resolve to see if the condition is still true. May triggers do always trigger. If they require a target, then you must choose a target, even if you have no intention of using that ability on resolution. It does still trigger, it does still go on the stack.
Yeah, and So number 5. What is the difference between a zone change trigger and an enters the battlefield / leaves the battlefield trigger? So enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield triggers occur based on the game state immediately before the permanent left the battlefield, or immediately after it entered. The triggered abilities actually trigger from the battlefield. Zone change triggers attempt to trigger from the new zone the permanent has entered. Um, like when this creature dies, deal damage equal to its power to a target creature or player. So it's never mind that.
Yeah, a good example of this. So a leaves the battlefield trigger will say, leaves the battlefield, or when this creature dies, or those are the two key things to look for. Zone change triggers are things like old Emrakul's or any of the three Titans, the original three Titans that all said, when this is put into your graveyard from anywhere. Basically, a good way to think of zone change triggers is something's changing zones, but it's not touching the battlefield. That's probably the best way to think about that. That is the difference between the two. And then entering and leaving the battlefield triggers will trigger from the battlefield. Even the leaves battlefield triggers will trigger from the battlefield. It looks at the game state right before the item left the battlefield. So let's say you've got a Zulaport Cutthroat in play and several other guys, and your opponent casts Planar Cleansing. Sure, we'll use that one, which destroys all non-land permanents. Important part is it destroys all creatures. You actually go to the game state right before that resolves to check for triggered abilities, which then Zulaport Cutthroat's going to trigger. Let's say you had 5 other creatures in him, it'll trigger 6 times. Whereas like the zone change trigger, because it's Emrakul says when it goes to the graveyard from anywhere, it actually triggers from the battlefield or from the zone that it goes to. In his case, from the graveyard, and that is true of any of those.
All right. So number 6. What makes something a state trigger, and when can a state trigger occur? So a state trigger occurs only when a specific game state is met. So like you don't control any other creatures, or there's no counters on your dark depths.
That is the most prime example
Yes.
of this.
So it happens when the specific game state is met, but a state trigger will only be added to the stack if there isn't currently that trigger already on the stack. So if your Dark Depths triggers because you have no counters on it, it won't trigger again until your ability is stifled, it's countered, or it resolves, or it otherwise leaves the stack. It's not going to go back on there an infinite number of times. No, it'll wait for each try to happen. So,
however, once it is countered, let's say by Stifle, if for some reason that state trigger is still true, which if your opponent stifled it, your Dark Depths most certainly still has no counters on it. It will try again once it's no longer on the stack.
Yes.
So, all right. Number 7. Adam casts Sharum the Hegemon and chooses to return Sculpting Steel with to the battlefield with Sharum's Enter the Battlefield ability. If Adam has no other artifacts in his graveyard, what are the legal targets for Sculpting Steel? And let's assume he has no other artifacts in play to copy with Sculpting Steel. So he's forced to copy Sharum the Hegemon. What are the legal targets for Sculpting Steel? Now Sharum's enters the battlefield abilities. So state-based effects are processed immediately before any triggers are added to the stack. So you're going to have 2 copies of Sharum. You're going to have... that is an old answer. Wow. Okay. So state-based abilities are processed immediately before any triggers are added to the stack. And so you're going to have to pick one of your Sharums that you're going to get to keep, and the other one's going to go to the graveyard. Then your Enters the Battlefield trigger will be added to the stack, and you are required to choose whichever one you put into the graveyard, whether it be the Sharum or the Sculpting Steel copying the original Sharum. And then because of this, unless somebody can interrupt this loop, this game's going to end in a draw. based on our example.
Yes. Now, note here again the triggered abilities timing. So, well, and in conjunction with state-based actions. So we have two shrooms on the battlefield. So the sculpting steel entered as a shroom the hegemon. So it has a trigger. That ability will trigger. Now we move towards players getting priority, but first we need to check for state-based actions. As a state-based action, there are two legendary creatures, so one will go into the graveyard. Then we put the trigger on the stack, because that's the next thing. Well, we check state-based actions again, but assuming nothing else is happening, we put the trigger on the stack. At this point, we choose the target for the trigger. So then that's why we end up in an infinite loop, because we have to grab it afterwards, but it's already been put into the graveyard.
Yes. All right. Number 8. Arnold is at 40 life and controls Felidar Sovereign. During Arnold's upkeep, after the trigger has gone on the stack, Nicodemus casts Shock, targeting Arnold. What happens after Shock resolves? So Felidar Sovereign has an intervening if clause, meaning it is going to recheck its trigger on resolution. When the trigger resolves, it will see Arnold is at 38 life and do nothing, and the game will continue.
And also note that if Arnold had started at 38 life, and then he cast some spell to gain him 3 life or something, the Felidar Sovereign never would have triggered. Because intervening if checks when it would go on the stack. If the condition is true, then we'll go ahead and add it, and then it also checks upon resolution.
And the important thing there is it checks when it would normally go on the stack, and if it's not true, it does not even go on the stack. That's the important thing there.
Yep.
If Arnold starts the turn at 38 life, he can't respond to the trigger to gain life because the trigger never goes on the stack.
Yep.
That is the important thing on the intervening if clause. Is if both triggers are not or both parts are not true, it does not trigger and does not go on the stack.
I feel like I've harped on that quite a bit, but
it's a thing that a lot of players miss, and that's why we go into it a lot.
Yeah.
So, all right. Number 9. Nanette controls Yixlid Jailer, and Amanda casts Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Nanette casts Cancel, targeting Kozilek. What happens after Cancel resolves? So Kozilek's ability is a zone change trigger, and the reason it's a zone change trigger is because it happens when he goes to the graveyard from anywhere. Because it is going to try and trigger from the graveyard, and Yixlid Jailer will remove Kozilek's ability, the trigger does not occur, and no cards are shuffled back. This is different from, I can't think of a creature that when it dies, you shuffle your graveyard into your library. This is...
There's World Spineworm, which shuffles itself.
Okay, and no, that's a zone change trigger because it's to the graveyard from anywhere. Anyways, again, I guess we've kind of covered that one enough, I think.
Yeah.
It would be different from our Zulapar Cutthroat example, because the Zulapar Cutthroat looks at when creatures die, but it checks itself from the battlefield. And it's important to note, actually, I know what I was going to mention on this one. It's important to note that this is always a zone change trigger. Even let's say Kozilek was on the battlefield, and you Tragic Slip him, so now he's a -2/-2, and then he goes to the graveyard. Because it checks whether he goes to the graveyard from anywhere, it's a zone change trigger, even if he does go to the graveyard from play. If the ability itself is only a leaves the battlefield ability, then it checks from the battlefield. But because it's from anywhere, it always checks from the graveyard, even if it's to the graveyard from the battlefield. A little confusing. Hopefully I've covered enough.
All right. So number 10. Anson controls Astral Slide and cycles Secluded Step, choosing to exile Nick's Grizzly Bears. Nick casts Demystifying, targeting Astral Slide. What happens during the end of turn step? So Astral Slide is whenever a player cycles a card, you may remove target creature from the game. If you do, return that creature to play under its owner's control at the end of turn. So basically what's happening is we are cycling a card to exile the Grizzly Bears, and then the Astral Slide is getting destroyed. So Astral Slide's ability creates a delayed trigger. So the delayed trigger is completely separate from the card at this point. So the Grizzly Bears will return to play, regardless of whether the Astro Slide is on the battlefield or not.
Think of it as once the ability has triggered, it sets up the delayed trigger later, and it again, like you said, it doesn't matter whether the Astro Slide is still there. The first trigger has happened, therefore the delayed trigger caused by that trigger will also happen.
Yeah.
So, all right, number 11. Andy has Jace Beleren out and uses the -1 to draw a card. He draws another Jace Beleren and casts it. After it resolves, what happens? If the new Jace remains on the battlefield, can he activate it? Andy must choose one of the Jaces to keep, and all the others are put into the graveyard. If he chooses to keep the newest Jace, he can activate it, as it is a new object and he has not activated a Planeswalker ability of that object yet this turn.
Yeah. The same is actually true if you had one Jace out and you decided you somehow made it leave the battlefield and then returned it to the battlefield.
Yes.
It will just be a new object, so you can activate its abilities.
Yes.
Number 12. So Alanon has 3 pack rats on the battlefield. Ned casts Cone of Flame, targeting all 3 pack rats. What happens after Cone of Flame resolves? Alright, so Cone of Flame deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and 2 damage to another target creature or player, and 3 damage to a third target creature or player. And pack rats' power toughness are each equal to the number of pack rats in play.
Number of rats
in play, sorry.
Yes.
When Cone of Flame resolves, before a player would get priority, we're going to check state-based actions. And one of these rats, which is all of them are currently 3/3s, one of them is going to have 3 damage marked on it. So that rat will be put into the graveyard as a state-based action. Now the rats are 2/2s, and one of the remaining ones has 2 damage marked on it. So that will be put into the graveyard.
A little too fast. So you ran your state-based checks, did the graveyard thing with the first one. Now they all become 2/2s. Then, because something happened during state-based checks, we run state-based checks again. That's why. Continue.
So yeah, we run it again, and so these rats, which are now 2/2s, one of them has 2 damage marked on it. So we'll put that into the graveyard from the battlefield as a state-based action. Now we will repeat state-based actions again because something happens, and now we'll see our lonely 1 pack rat, which is a 1/1 with 1 damage marked on it, and it will be put into the graveyard from the battlefield as a state-based action.
All right, and last but not least, number 13. AJ has a Tarmogoyf with no cards in any graveyards. He casts Hornet Sting, targeting Tarmogoyf. What happens to Tarmogoyf after Hornet Sting resolves? So, as Hornet Sting resolves, it deals 1 damage to the Tarmogoyf. However, state-based effects are not checked until a player would receive priority. The next step of the spell resolving is to put it into the graveyard, which will make Tarmogoyf a 1/2. When state-based actions are checked, they see that there is a 1/2 Tarmogoyf with 1 damage marked on it, and do nothing.
Yeah.
This happens often enough in Modern, except not with Hornet Sting. I have seen people cast Lightning Bolts without an instant in the graveyard yet, and turn the 2/3 Tarmogoyf into a 3/4 with 3 damage marked on it. That happens far more often than people would like to.
Oh yeah.
Or back in Standard back in the day, it was worse because they would have a 1/2 Tarmogoyf. There's no instant or tribal, and they would cast Nameless Inversion, and now they have a 6/1 Tarmogoyf because that's how it works.
Yeah.
So
that's.
All right, well, that covers our review questions for this week. I don't see any questions based on that, so if you have any questions on the review test, please feel free to message us. We answer the messages at the Rochester Judge Class Facebook page. We both have access to it, and our response time, I think, is currently under 30 minutes, actually. So feel free to message us there. We'll be happy to answer any questions about this.
And if you are watching us live, we have the chat. If you have any questions on this at any point during the lesson today, just go ahead and ask us there.
All right, but with that, it is time to get into this week. So this week, we are going to be talking about the Judging at Regular Rules Enforcement Level document, commonly referred to as the JAR. So the jar, quick overview of the jar, is only a 2-page document. It is very concise. This is used for regular REL. The reason behind it being very concise is they want to minimize the amount of necessary rules interactions for people just playing Magic to basically to have fun. Now, there's a lot of like rules and rules interactions when you get to competitive rules enforcement level, which I believe we've talked. And at some point, we're going to do a whole section on that. But that is a different class. You don't have to worry about that for the level 1
Yes.
test. So we're not going to talk about that here today. Today we are just talking about regular rules enforcement levels, regular REL. This should be the REL that you're seeing at your Friday Night Magics. Most of your Magic events, unless it's very specifically a competitive event, your pre-releases, which good time to get to this with the pre-release coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it really, it's the rules document that covers 98.5% of all sanctioned Magic. Because 98 point there is a statistic handed to us to judges in general from Wizards, which is 98.5% of all Magic is at regular REL. So this actually covers a lot of the Magic that you will probably be interacting with.
Um, so the judging at regular rules enforcement level document, the jar, it has a intro section. So the gist of the intro section is just, Magic players are here for fun. They see the tournament as a social event more than anything else. Like you go to FNM, you just want to play, joke around with friends, whatever. So our demeanor should reflect this, whether we're playing, judging, or both of those things. And we want to be able to help them out. Is really our job at Regular REL. So this document, it's about fixing the game when something goes wrong. Really, that's what the core of this is. We can't prevent players from making mistakes, so we can educate them, and that's another large part of being a
Yes.
judge. If you can, help impart rules knowledge, preferably outside of matches.
Yes.
But if you can, help people learn the game better, that's a great thing. But um, we want to be able to fix things that happen, and that's what this is. So big thing about this is you should uh, you should intervene when you see something illegal happen in a match. Um, but beyond this, you can exercise your discretion. So if you see someone, miss a trigger or something, you don't have to step in. Depending on like how competitive your FNM is, like if it's a really casual place, a bunch of new players or whatnot, you may want to, hey, you missed your trigger there. But if it's a bunch of, cutthroat, we're gonna bring home our FNM promo prize and $8 store credit or whatnot. Then, you know,
Even
it's different.
even then, look, we play at 2 very different stores. John's store is actually a very casual store, and my store is most definitely a more competitive store. But even at the more competitive store, like it is regular REL. Like they're though they want to win, though the players at that store they want to win. Like they do. Like they're practicing for going to competitive events. They still understand that they want it to be a welcoming place for the non-competitive players as well, because they want players to get better. And that's kind of what your job is as a judge, as becoming a judge. Is you want players to be better players, because the better they're playing the game, usually the less arguments that can happen, the less bad things that can happen. And this is just doing things in the way that getting the rules to work the way they should. So so as a judge, typically, especially players who play at more competitive events, they will just call for a judge. They'll just say judge in a loud enough voice to kind of get in your case your attention. And then this is your cue. Somebody needs help answering a question. I would say most of the time you're just going to be answering a rules thing. Okay, we want to do this. How does this work? And when answering question, feel free to double check the rules if you aren't sure of your answer. There are lots of documents and apps. By the way, I highly recommend MTG Familiar. It has a lot of that stuff built into it.
Unfortunately, there isn't one for the iOS, which is nearly as good. But if you're on Android, really,
I forget that it's not available for iOS.
Yeah.
Make sure, feel free to double check your answer. Your players will appreciate that you'd rather get the answer right rather than you'd rather get the answer correct than seem like you're getting it correct. So, go ahead, take a couple minutes, double check, check Gatherer. Gatherer will actually have your answer to most of the rulings, I'd say like 90% of the time, if you're not sure of a ruling. And that's what Gatherer is there for.
Yeah.
Remember, when you do answer a question, make sure that you're going to give players extra time to finish their match to compensate for any time that you took in their ruling. The fixes found in other documents that you may find, such as the Infraction Procedure Guide, commonly referred to as the RPG, those are designed for stricter environments and do not apply at regular REL. Those are for competitive only, and as a level 1, you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
If a player accidentally breaks a rule, you use the remedies described that we're going to talk about later today, and your own common sense as a guide to make the best ruling you can. Now, intentionally breaking a rule is cheating and is a serious problem. Where am I at here? Serious problem.
Yeah.
This delay is killing me. Not used to having such a delay. I still haven't actually done it on my delay yet. There we go.
There we are.
But the serious problems we're going to get to later, these are generically unwanted behavior. Which we'll get to later.
They're real big problems, and we're going to have to disqualify someone if these serious problems come up, like cheating.
Yeah. But now, actually, I'm going to give you the real quick overview of how judging at regular REL works. There are two main things. You're either going to fix the game to the best of your ability. You're not going to always be able to fix it perfectly. That's fine. You're either going to fix the game to your best of your ability, or you're going to leave the game as it is because you can't fix it. Those are your two options. Now, at regular REL, you're given quite a bit of leeway to, if you can find a solution that both players seem happy with, that is perfectly fine. It is actually literally written in this document. If you can find a solution that both players agree with and are happy with, great. And then I guess there's the third issue, whereas, this is a serious problem, which we'll get to at the end.
Yeah. And a note, like, if you run into a problem, like, if you're not just answering, some rules question, which hopefully you're well prepared for because that was the first 7 weeks of this class.
True story.
But if you're not just answering a rules question, if you're actually trying to fix a problem, the important thing to remember is that we're here for player education. Like, helping them to not make that mistake in the future and not have to deal with any potential negative consequences of, you having to fix the situation, or even just the feel-bads of, well, I guess I can't fix it, we'll just leave it here. Avoiding all of that in the future just leads to better experiences for the players.
Yeah.
And
so continuing into the jar here, if you feel that this too far, John. There we go. If you feel the suggested remedy is not well adapted to your particular situation, this is the important line of text, then you can suggest a more appropriate fix which is accepted by both players and apply that fix instead. Player education is priority, just like John said. Remind the players to play more carefully, but don't be too heavy-handed in order to keep events fun and relaxed. It is regular REL. It's supposed to be primarily a fun time. Now, if a player continues to repeat a mistake despite multiple reminders, it is written in here that you can warn them that the next occurrence will result in a game loss. Now, hopefully, this final step will never come up, and you can remind them of this, but knowing that it's possible should get them to correct the behavior. In the event if your event that you're judging for requires deck lists, provides large prizes, or is otherwise a more competitive nature, then it may be better for you to run your event at competitive REL. This is very dependent on your store, and it'll probably make sense. Like it's the big things is if your group is very competitive, like even with my competitive group compared to John's casual group, like we still run our FNMs at regular REL. But any event that we run that's outside of like premier events that are required to be competitive, like if we run an event with a larger prize, we will run it at competitive REL because when there's larger prizes on the line, it tends to be you're gonna want that level of what's the word I'm looking for?
Uh,
You want that level of rules behind you to help better run your tournaments.
yeah, like the jar can be a little like loosey goosey, like leaving it up to the judge's hands how to fix problems, and that can lead to accusations of like bias or just this isn't consistent.
Which, when there's nothing on the line, is not nobody's gonna really give you that kind of
Yeah.
an issue. But if you do have like large prizes on the line, then you want to just you want to follow the policy.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend in that case that you go move it up to competitive REL. All right. So the next section of this is common issues, which is just a list of common issues and suggested fixes in the jar. So.
The first one is a player forgets a triggered ability. Like we were saying before, the keywords for triggered abilities: when, whenever, or at. But these abilities are considered missed if the player did not acknowledge the ability in any way at the point that it required choices or had a visible in-game effect. So if the ability includes the word may, assume the player chose not to perform it. Otherwise, use your judgment to decide if putting the trigger on the stack now would be too disruptive. Don't add it to the stack if significant decisions have been made based on the effects not happening. Unlike other illegal actions, which must be pointed out, players may choose whether or not to point out their opponent's missed triggers, though we encourage them to do so.
This part of the policy is exactly the same when you move up to competitive REL, and that's why this is written in this way. Yes. What am I missing?
So it's almost the same.
It is very nearly the same.
In this one, you are the one who has the final judgment on whether you think it would be better to put this on the stack or leave it as it is. So you make that decision, unless it's a may ability, in which case we're just going to assume they chose not to.
Yep. No, you're correct. Yep.
That's a big difference between competitive and regular events if you've played in a bunch of competitive.
And then just for an example, like if my primary thought process on whether or not it's too disruptive to go back or to put that ability on the stack, and this is true like once I jump to competitive REL2 is turns like how long has it been? It's like how many things have happened since this person forgot this trigger. If it's like, well, I played this thing, and then I forgot my trigger, and then I played a land, and then when I went to play my next spell, I remembered I missed this trigger. Okay, all you've really done is play a land and maybe start casting your next spell. Okay, we can fix that. That's fine. It's like, well, last turn I forgot. No, if it's been more than a turn, then at that point it's usually too late and too disruptive to the game state. Even if it gets to your opponent's turn, again, it depends on how much has happened. Use your best judgment here.
Yeah. So the next
common issue.
Sorry, we should have mentioned that a little.
I called it common issues.
You did? Okay. So yeah, first category, common issues. So the next common issue, a player sees a card in a library that he or she shouldn't have seen. So we're just gonna shuffle the card into the unknown part of the library. Now, note that like if there's any scries or looked at the top 4 cards of the library and put them back or anything like that, we're gonna have to keep those cards intact. We just want to put it back where it randomly was.
This will happen like if your player it does this like sticky sleeves, sometimes no sleeves if the cards themselves are just sticky, or if they're like if you're in a more competitive environment such as myself, it's like I'm shuffling my opponent's library, I accidentally saw a card. Sorry. That one you kind of want to wag a finger a little bit more sternly. It's like, come on, don't do that. Gives you an advantage. You shouldn't do that. And then yes, the fixed board is you want to shuffle only the unknown portion of the library, like John said. If you have a scry, let's say you mulligan to 6, you have to scry to the bottom, you haven't shuffled yet, and then you go to draw and you have a couple cards stick together. Well, we can fix that. The first card you should have drawn, so you unstick the cards, let them draw that card, and then you're going to shuffle the accidentally revealed card into the unknown portion of the library. Now, they know the bottom card because of the scry, so you're going to shuffle everything else and then put it back on top of that scry to the bottom card.
Yeah.
I think that covers it.
So the next one, a player accidentally draws more cards than he or she was supposed to. So if the identity of the cards were known to everybody, this is really easy to fix.
However, usually that's not the case.
Yeah. We just return them to the proper zone. Otherwise, determine how many extra cards have been drawn, and then we're going to take that many cards at random from the player's hand and place them on the top of the library. Don't shuffle the library after doing this. They still would have drawn those cards, and those could have been the cards they had in hand. We're not just going to shuffle away cards they might have had in hand. We're just going to put them on the top of the library. And yeah, if the extra cards were drawn while drawing an opening hand, though, shuffle the extra cards back into the deck instead and allow the player to continue making mulligan decisions with the remaining cards.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to put them back on top if they're making mulligan decisions.
Right. Basically, yeah. There's two sections to this. There's the first, which is we are mulliganing, and then we're not mulliganing. If we're mulliganing, you just you take a card at random, put them to the correct hand size. That's pretty easy. And then shuffle the library afterwards, because they shouldn't know what's on top. Now, again, yes, they shouldn't know what's on top. This is one of those where this is the closest clean solution that we can get to. So yeah, you're going to take a card at random from the player's hand, place it on top of the library. And this puts them down to the correct number of cards. Yes, they may know what that top card is, but it's as close as we can come. Now, we don't want to shuffle the library because they should have drawn the card eventually. Like I said, this is not a clean solution. This is the cleanest we can get to. Drawing extra cards is an issue that happens in games of Magic, which is still currently being worked on in competitive REL, and until we get a perfect solution there, this is as close as we can get. Yeah. So, the last common issue is a player makes an in-game error not mentioned above. So this is going to cover the bulk of player errors. Let's see, I accidentally cast Wrath of God, but I didn't have any white mana, or pretty much any of your gameplay errors. And usually the least disruptive option is to leave the game as it is, after fixing anything that is currently illegal. Such as if you have let's see, what's a good example? You somehow have a white enchantment on a Black Knight. Those cards aren't or Black Knight's not in standard. Protection isn't in standard, so that actually eliminates several things. Yeah, so you typically are gonna, in this situation, if an in-game error occurred, you're gonna leave the game as it is after fixing things that are illegal. If the error involved a player forgetting to draw or discard cards, you have them do that action immediately. So let's say the player calls you. It's like, hey, I forgot to draw my card for the turn. Okay, well you can't skip that. You can't forget that. It's not a triggered ability. So draw your card. Same thing with discarding. You go, they call you over. Judge, my opponent, I was about to, cast this discard spell. My opponent has 8 cards in hand, and it's my turn. It's like, okay, well, we're going to have them discard right now because, they should have discarded at the end of the turn, and then we'll continue play from here.
And these actually aren't time dependent. If you can verify that, they were supposed to have, drawn a card 2 turns ago, you can still make them draw a card. And also, oh, Judge, I went to draw for turn, and I drew my card for turn, and then I realized I had 9 cards in hand, and I didn't draw at all during there, so I was supposed to have discarded 1. We're just going to make them discard now.
Yeah. as long as you can pretty easily verify that.
Yeah.
Now, otherwise, if the error was caught quickly, and and not many things have happened since then, you can try and do a rewind. Which a rewind, you're gonna undo all the actions back to the illegal action that happened. Let's say I tried to
Cast Wrath of God for.
I was thinking of something else. Like I tried to cast an enchantment on something with hexproof. That's a good example.
Sure.
I tried to pacify something of yours with hexproof. And well, I can't do this, so I do it, and then let's say I then follow up by casting a grizzly bear, and I go to pass John the turn, and then John's like, whoa, 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 my dude has hexproof. Now, there's only two things that have happened. You cast the spell illegally, then you cast a grizzly bear. If those are the only two things that have happened, that's fine. We're going to rewind it because maybe you had like a 4-cost card that you wanted to play instead, knowing that you can't cast pacifism, and we want to give you the ability to make that decision. Again, you know, one or two things, fine. 3 or 4, if it's easy and doesn't involve undoing card draws, fine. Much more than that, feel free to be like, I think rewinding is feel free to be able to say to your players that I feel like rewinding is more disruptive than leaving the game as it is. Sorry, please play on. That is a thing that we as judges will do also at competitive REL events, and you should definitely feel comfortable doing that at a regular REL event.
Yeah. Don't go crazy with it. I mean, you can do a variety of things to rewind. You can return random cards from the hand to the library to undo card draws. Though, again, don't shuffle the library if you do this. You can untap permanents. You can undo combat, but...
Though undoing combat is its own ball of wax. So.
Yeah, it's... Undoing combat is, in very few situations, going to be one of the ones you are okay with rewinding.
If the combat was, well, he didn't have any blockers, I swung with 2 guys and dealt him 6 damage, okay, you can probably undo that. But if the combat was, well, I swung with these 2 guys... He did these 2 blocks. He cast these 2 combat tricks.
Yeah.
Now we're getting in the realm of I think it's much more disruptive to go back.
Yep.
So it is a judgment call. It literally says in the jar that it is your call as to whether or not to try and undo these things. Don't go crazy. Whatever be as least disruptive as possible.
Yeah.
So, and the very last line is, this can be very disruptive where lots of decisions have been made or hidden information, such as those combat tricks I just mentioned, has been revealed since the illegal actions. So don't go crazy with this. Exact quote from the jar. Don't go crazy with this.
Yep.
Okay. So the last common issue is a player has illegal, insufficient, or another player's card in his or her deck. And didn't do this on purpose. If they did it on purpose, then it's a serious issue. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But first, usually like the illegal or the insufficient is like, if it's insufficient, it's like, I actually only had 59 cards here. Then the 60th card got stuck in my box. In that case, you fix it. You shuffle in the extra card, continue playing. So illegal, if they have cards that are illegal in the format, it says here that you then add basic lands of that player's choice to the deck if you're then below the minimum size for the deck. Now, regular REL does allow you to be like, okay, well, you clearly,
there'll be questions on the level 1 test about the specific thing. Don't tell them wrong.
All right. There are other solutions that are available to you, but this is the solution that is in here. Be aware of that for your test. And I will stop myself.
Yeah.
Any cards that are added to the deck should be shuffled directly into the library. If the error was discovered during a draw effect, so it's like, I drew this card, this is my opponent's pacifism that he put on my creature from the last match. You then get to, you fix it, give the guy back his pacifism. He'll shuffle it into his library because he's currently short a card. And then you complete the draw effect after your deck is fixed and shuffled, which...
Yeah.
So, I highly encourage your players, and I highly recommend doing this in general, to make sure you count your deck, and sideboard before starting a game to try and avoid these errors. You'll see a lot of people that'll do the pile shuffle. One of the reasons why they do that is they're actually counting their deck to make sure they have the right number of cards.
Yeah.
It'll help you avoid the, my 60th card was in my box. Try and avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, we can fix it, but it's...
Yes.
Yeah, it's bad. So yeah, those are the common problems. As you can see, like, pretty much all of those are relating to the comprehensive rules, except for the very last one with the cards in your deck, how many... That's more in the realm of tournament rules. But all the other questions are really just the comprehensive rules. The stuff we've been covering for the past 7 weeks.
Yes.
They broke one of those. So the next section, the general unwanted behaviors, is pretty much it covers the tournament rules for the most part, and it's just things we don't want players doing at a tournament because it's bad for the tournament. So the general unwanted behaviors.
Mm-hmm. It's not just bad for the tournament, it's usually bad for other players at the tournament, not just that particular player. And that's why it's considered general unwanted behaviors. So there are 4 primary examples of these. Players taking an unreasonable amount of time to sideboard and making play decisions. Inadequate shuffling. Asking for or providing strategic advice during a match or a draft. And tardiness. So these are the general unwanted behaviors. As a judge, the priority is to educate players who exhibit these behaviors. It can be useful to reinforce this education with more stern penalties should the unwanted behaviors continue, but first you kind of want to be, light-handed on it. Tardiness, when we're talking tardiness, we're not talking, we started the clock, you're tardy. No, we're talking, we started the clock, you were in the restroom, you're a couple minutes late, you're fine. You're fine. Tardiness for the general unwanted behaviors refers to this person is more than 10 minutes late to their match.
Well, it can be less than that, but basically, like, there isn't any good reason, and we didn't know you were going to be late, and you've just held up the entire round, really, because you're showing up late. Like, yeah, without telling anyone, I just decided to swing by the retail store next door and just like check out, their cool, their cool iPhone accessories.
I think a better example probably, and this works for both of our stores, is I ran out to get food. Didn't know it was going to take me so long. Like either ran into traffic or Subway had a bus, or in your case, McDonald's was packed. Whatever the case may be. But that person left, didn't tell anybody that they were going to get food, and so this is a general unwanted behavior. It's like if they're going to do that, you want them to at least tell you or inform you as the judge, or inform a store employee, so that store employee knows that, or whoever's running the tournament, so they know that that you're going to be late getting back. Because then, as long as they know, if that player informs you that they're going to be late, then it's not a big deal. You at least know where that player is.
And as far as like, what is acceptable tardiness, again, varies depending on your store. Like if you're holding like 50 or 60 player F&Ms, like it's kind of a big deal if someone is 5 minutes late, even if the store owner knew that they were running out for food.
Mm-hmm. Now, if your F&M is like 12 to 16 players, you can probably keep track of everybody who's there, and being a little bit late is not as big a deal.
Especially because, like, with fewer players, you're less likely to run to time each time.
The other important thing with the tardiness is a player that is more than 10 minutes late to a match is considered to have forfeited the match and should be dropped. Now, let's say they come back 12 minutes after and they're like, hey, sorry, it's fine if I lose this round, but I just want to keep playing. You can undrop them. That is something that Wizards Event Reporter lets you do. But that is the general rule. Is if they're more than 10 minutes late, they're considered to have forfeited the match.
Yeah.
Regular REL is many players' first experience to Magic tournaments, so ensuring a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere is important. A player whose behavior may be upsetting others or making them uncomfortable should be educated and asked to stop immediately. If they make no attempt to correct their behavior, Applying a game loss may reinforce the seriousness of the issue. If this does not stop the behavior, or if a player is being threatened, aggressive, or harassing other players, these then are upgraded to serious problems. So,
General unwanted behaviors, things we would like to not have in our tournament because they cause minor issues to more than just the player, to everyone around them. Serious problems, these are, we cannot have these in our tournament.
They are what is the phrase for this? They are disrupting the integrity of the tournament as a whole.
Yeah.
That is the difference between the general unwanted behaviors and serious problems. General unwanted behaviors, you don't want them, but are they going to are they?
Do you think like a player being 5 minutes tardy is going to like ruin everyone's experience for the night? No. Probably not. Or if they're slow playing a little, no. It's like we don't want them to, but like it's not gonna ruin the night for people. Serious problems will.
Yes. So certain actions will not be tolerated under any circumstance. This is the beginning of the serious problem section. Every effort should be made to educate players before and during events. However, ignorance is not an acceptable defense of these actions of serious problems. Any player engaging in the following must be removed from your event, and at the organizer's discretion, removed from the venue entirely. So DQ, no prize, please go home. Anything that is aggressive, violent, harassing, or abusive behavior, whether it be physical or verbal. This includes any of your, like racial slurs, sexual slurs, sexual aggression, sexual harassment, any of these things.
Flipping a table.
Flipping a table. Any of these things. Yeah. Threats. Threats go into this category as well.
Yelling because you like anything that's really aggressive, violent, or harassing or abusive.
With the violent ones, like if they do something that causes the entire room to stop what they're doing and look at them because they did something, you need to DQ that player. That is a good, solid indicator. Even if only like 3/4 of the room like turns in that direction, you're probably going to be looking at that.
Even if just the match is next to them, depending on what it is, it might not be visible to the entire room. But if if it causes the matches next to them to very keenly look at at this player and take quite a bit of notice, like it could even be
at that point
enough.
The next one in serious problems: intentionally and knowingly breaking or letting an opponent break game or tournament rules, or lying in order to gain an advantage. Bluffing about cards opponents can't normally see is permitted. If I want to bluff, that one of my 5 lands in hand is a counterspell in the hopes that my opponent won't cast a spell, that I can certainly do.
Yes.
But I can't then say counterspell, discard my land, and put it in the graveyard. Now I've broken a rule. Yes, intentionally and knowingly breaking a rule. Or letting an opponent, like if an opponent breaks a rule because it's giving you an advantage, that is the same exact thing.
Now, the only exception to that is mistriggers. You do not have to point out mistriggers, but
yes,
any other game rule or tournament rule, even for that matter, infraction can be cheating.
Yes. Now, the next one, which is unwanted behavior, determining match outcomes by incentives, coercion, or outside the game methods, or gambling on any part of a tournament. So gambling on any part of the tournament, the one that I've seen that happen most commonly is fantasy magic. No fantasy magic. That is considered gambling on part of the tournament and is a serious problem and requires a DQ. Determining the match outcomes by incentives, that's pretty obvious. That means bribery. Somebody offering, it's like, hey, I just want to win because I want to get this F&M promo. Here's $5. Well, that's bribery. That's bad. DQ, no prize. Coercion. I really want this F&M promo. Give me the win here, or we're gonna have a discussion outside later. Well, that's coercion and a threat. DQ, no prize. Go home. Outside the game methods. This is the one which can sometimes feel bad to hand it a DQ. But outside the game methods is, hey, we're going to time. Neither of us is going to win this. Can we just roll a die to see who wins? No, that is a DQ. Cannot do that. The reason behind this is Wizards of the Coast already has certain amounts of issues trying to in certain localities to convince local governments that Magic the Gathering tournaments are not gambling. So you cannot determine matches by anything other than playing Magic. You cannot determine them with a die roll. You can't. Let's say you're in turns because you've gone to time, and your opponent's like, hey, can we just look at the top few cards to see what would have happened? No, that's also an outside the game method because the game isn't going to go that far. That is also a DQ. Can't do it by rock paper scissors. That anything other than playing Magic is a DQ. Now, if we're gonna go to draw and I'm like, you know what, I want to go home early, I'll concede, and there's nothing involved with that, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But can't do it for an incentive, can't coerce people, can't use an outside the game method, and no gambling, no fantasy Magic.
Yeah. No, it's fantasy football season. It is not. It's never fantasy.
It's
Magic.
never fantasy Magic season.
Yeah. And the final one is simply theft. This can include like during a draft, if you have like super awesome hand, replacing one of the cards with a card from your binder. That's theft. So yeah, don't.
Most instances of theft are pretty self-explanatory.
Don't steal things.
Don't steal things. If your players are stealing things, that's a DQ. DQ, no prize, go home. Probably banned from venue. Most stores I know, when they find thieves, ban them from the venue. So, and I've worked with several different stores. So, as I've kind of said, DQ, no prize, go home. So, when you remove a player in any of these 4 ways, this is called a disqualification. And you must always try to educate your players on why these actions are unacceptable. Now, honestly, most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but they clearly did them, and so you still need to educate the player on why it's unacceptable. Also, let the player know that while your decision is final, because you are the judge, the judge program would still like to hear his or her side of the story, and they can contact their local regional coordinator. Which all the regional coordinator...
You can contact your local regional
that.
Coordinator, high-level judge, or a Wizards Play Network representative to guide you through the process of disqualification, and that process will include giving them a chance for feedback and telling them their next steps on that.
Honestly, any judge level 2 and higher, because they are certified to run competitive level events, they are more likely to have dealt with a disqualification. So if you have a level 2 judge in your area, or if you're in our area, we're level 2 judges. If you have any questions about the process of a disqualification, feel free to contact us.
Now I'm gonna get a little on my high horse.
All right.
Stephen Briggs, the regional coordinator for the what's his region called? Great Lakes?
No, he's in the Central region because he's from Chicago.
That's right. The regional coordinator for the Central region gave a presentation and talked some at the judge conference we were just at.
2 weeks ago?
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
But he had a little spiel. If you are not willing to...
I'm going to pause you here. To run competitive REL, you need to be able to do what you're about to go into. So
really?
We don't have... Yep.
No.
That is for the level 2 judges. That is not for the level 1s. We'll cover it next week if I'm wrong. How about that?
You need to be willing to disqualify a player.
Yeah.
Is what he said.
Yes.
You need to be willing to do that at level 1.
You need to...
So...
Well...
If you're not willing to be able to disqualify a player, if they commit a serious problem, you can't be a judge. You need to be willing to do this because this is vital to the integrity of the tournament.
And vital to the integrity of the program. No, you're right. We'll keep going.
So if you don't have to feel good about, giving a player a disqualification because... this is their first F&M, and they decide to roll a die rather than letting it go to time. We have to disqualify them there, but you don't have to feel good about it. I don't think any judge feels good
Most
about
judges don't. Yeah, actually, I don't think there's any judges that feel good about that.
But you have to be willing to. If you can't do that part of the job, unfortunately, you cannot be a judge.
It is necessary. Like, because if you're allowing aggressive behavior or if you're allowing cheating at your events, like you then are destroying the integrity of the tournaments that you're at, and that's a serious problem in and of itself. That is why you need to be willing to. You need to be able to disqualify someone. You don't have to like it, even if they're doing something and like you could still be allowed to feel bad. Like even if they were cheating, and you DQ them, maybe they. I don't. All right, I'm not going to use cheating. Like, let's do the aggressive ones. Like, they had a bad night, they were frustrated, they just got aggressive, even if it was just for a short time. You don't have to feel good about it. You can feel bad about having to disqualify that player. You still got to do it.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
And the very final thing in the jar, it has some awesome links to resources. So
if you've watched other parts of this, the early weeks we talked about this more, but the very first app is, or the very first link is apps.magiccjudges.org, which is a great place to look for both information as well as looking into events that you can apply to judge at. Yeah, I said that right. Okay.
And if you aren't on there yet, well, we'll probably push it more the next couple of weeks to really try and get you on there.
It is recommended by our regional coordinator, Rob McKenzie, to just get all of the judge candidates onto judge apps.
Yeah. If you need an answer right now, though, there's also chat.magiccjudges.org, which it's a chat. It has a couple of channels, one about like rules questions specifically, the other one about like judge things, like if you had to fill out a disqualification or something. Well, that might not be the best resource, but it could at least get you hooked up with better resources.
Yes. There is always somebody on those chats. That's why we recommend those, because there are judges in all parts of the world, so there's usually somebody awake that is on those.
Yeah.
The Magic Tournament rules give more information about how to run tournaments at any rules enforcement level. They can be found at the third link. You linked the whole jar, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I linked the whole jar.
That's the one. It's the wpn.wizards.com/stuff. That one is your Magic Tournament rules. The thing that has at the end, the thing I lovingly like to call the chart, gives you information on how to run events at any regular at any rules enforcement level, not just regular.
We'll be going over the MTR in depth next week.
Yes.
And it also has some more further resources. Add a link on there. But yeah, I think we've gone over most of these resources. But just if you are not sure, can't think off the top of your head where to find it, well, it's actually in the jar even.
Again, I actually just highly recommend read through the entire jar. It's 2 pages. It's really easy. Covers. We went through and did some more things in depth with some explanations. But the jar covers everything you need to know for regular rules enforcement level. And there is a significant portion of the test, which is the jar. So get to read it. Probably reread it, get to know it very well. It'll cover most of your questions, or most of your tournament policy questions on the test.
Yeah. And yeah, you're recommending it. I was just gonna be like, this is your homework. But anyways, yeah, you definitely want to read through it for yourself. Just get your eyes on it. Just get another refresher of all this. Put it in a different part of memory, so it'll really stick.
I'm trying to do the math. It's about 6 or 7 questions out of your 25 questions, so it's about a quarter of your test is this 2-page document.
Yeah.
So be aware of that.
So, yeah, that is the jar. So we have a couple of orders of business before we sign off tonight. So,
just checking us for time. We are good.
Yep. We're currently working on writing up a final practice test. So this is going to be via a Google survey, the Google Forms, I mean.
We're going to post it after next. So normally on our practice tests, we've been posting them on the Friday to give people the weekend to look at them, go over them, and then we've been going over them in class. So for the final practice test, we're going to post that that night. So next week, Monday, is the last class. We're going to be going over the MTR. And then right afterwards is when we're going to be posting the final practice test.
Yeah. Now, the final practice test, if you're planning on testing for level 1, one of the requirements for that is just a level 2, recommending you somehow.
And how we're going to recommend you is you're going to take this test.
Yeah. You're going to take this test. Besides just being our recommendation, it's a really good way of, seeing where you're at, for one thing, and helping us with our review week, knowing what we need to go over to help you.
Which also means the sooner you get that done, the better it is for us to build the review week for the class.
Yeah. So again, don't worry if you do poorly on that. If you do really poorly, we might follow up with you, but that will only benefit you.
Yes.
Be like, hey, you should take a level 1 practice test on your own time, one of the official ones, or follow up with individualized help or articles or whatever on what you're struggling with.
I guess I should say important. I don't want to put it like copyright note, but so if you've gone into Judge Center and you've taken any of the level 1 practice tests, the questions that we're going to have on our practice test are not related to those disclaimer. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
This is a disclaimer. So the questions on those level 1 practice tests online are property of the Wizards of the Coast, and they are private information. This is to keep the practice tests useful and viable. Because there's only a certain number of questions total, and then every time it makes a practice test, it pulls from the same pool of questions. So the questions on our test are not going to be any of those questions because we don't want to ruin that. And we want our test to also to be able to be relevant for you.
Yep.
Also, as a side note, because it pulls from the same pool of questions, just continuing or repeatedly taking level 1 practice tests doesn't benefit you too much because you're going to start seeing a lot of the same questions.
I think the practice tests are 20 questions, and there are 146 questions. So it'll give you new questions each time if it can, but
it tries.
Yeah.
But once you get past like 2 or 3 times, you'll start seeing repeat questions.
If you run into all of the MTR focused questions, then you'll just start seeing those again. Or if you run out all of the JAR related questions, then you'll start seeing those again.
And this is why our practice test that we're making is going to be unique questions that we've come up with ourselves.
Yep. It will be in the format of the actual level 1 test, so it'll be untimed. Each question will be multiple choice, which might include select any that match the answer.
Which is a format from the test.
Yes. And it'll just be 5 possible answers for each question.
Any card text for any cards referenced in any of the questions will be provided, except for Grizzly Bear, or anything that is a blank 2/2 for 2. That won't be on there because it's a Grizzly Bear. It's a 2/2 for 2 with no abilities. But any other cards, the full text will be provided as part of the question.
And they even provide Grizzly Bears on the actual test.
I guess that's fair.
But so take that practice test once we get it up next week. That will be your ticket for us to test you or recommend that you get tested if you're not in our area and you'll be tested by some other level 2.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the practice test will be a great resource, and it'll also have, besides the test itself, it'll have a little bit of information, just like your name, a way to contact you, and what state if you're in our region, or if not, what state.
Probably city-state. Well, actually, just state, yeah.
Yeah, just state can give us enough information to start getting in.
Actually, we should do city-state because, let's say that, a person's in Iowa, Decorah, Iowa, 1 hour from us, super easy. Council Bluffs, Iowa, that's a little farther away. Then we're going to probably be contacting people who are closer to that area, either Robert or Josh Schroeder.
And also, whether you're planning on testing at the judge at the Judge Mob on October 2nd.
Because then that way we can have everything we need for you prepared ahead of time.
Yes.
Everything printed, everything ready, so then you can just start taking the test once you arrive.
And also your preference of Chipotle meat for the catering, if you are planning on attending. So, and a little bit more information on what you would like to go over for the review week. But yeah, so we will have all that up next Monday, right after the class is done. But you do need to take that if you want to test for
Yes.
level 1. Other than that, like I touched on a little bit, October 2nd, the Judge Mob.
Even if you don't plan on testing, feel free to come down and hang out with judges. Judges,
Yes.
we think we're cool people, or at least cool enough people. Feel free to come hang out, play some. There'll be some amount of Commander because let's face it, Commander is a format created by judges.
Yeah.
So there will probably be some Commander. There might be some draft. It'll kind of depend on who's there and what we want to do. But there will definitely be some magic happening.
And free Chipotle.
So.
But other than that, I think that pretty much wraps up this week and our lesson on the jar.
All right. So signing off. I am once again. I'm Stacy Winchell.
I'm John Aratinji, and thank you for joining us for week 8 of the online judge.